everyone, it's Dibblee. We're here again today at Frock Talk Television and super excited about today. I have a really dear friend on that I'm going to introduce to you in a little bit, as well as my dear friend Sue Ferreira, who is the big brain behind Frock Talk Television. She has helped me create all things techie to make sure we get the message into the world. And in a second or two, I'm going to introduce you to Sue first so she can share a little bit with you, and then I'm going to bring on our fabulous guest. I'm going to hold off and surprise you with who she is. And let me tell you, there's no sitting around with her in the room. So get ready, hold on to your socks. We're going to have a real conversation. And it's all about, at Frock Talk, it's all about being real and taking off the frocks. So we're not about perfectionism, but we are about being real. So stay tuned. So for now, I'm going to ask Sue to share a little bit about who she is. She downplays her role, so I have to tell you she rocks. And now, Sue, tell them a bit about you.
Well, there you go. Okay, my name is Sue Ferreira, and as I always say, I've transformed my life from being a physician to doing this because I would never retire. I would get too bored twiddling my thumbs or doing anything like that. So, you know, I love traveling, but I still love doing stuff and giving back. So I have this tech event, and I'm just helping Jo take herself out of the world. And you know what is really exciting? I think I sent this to you yesterday, Jo. The tech is amazing. Tony Robbins has just hologrammed himself for 6 hours from Florida to Melbourne. So get ready. We're going to have Jo Dibblee and Sue Ferreira on hologram before you know it. Coming to a planet near you. That's me. So back to you and our amazing guest.
Thank you, Sue. I love that, the whole hologram thing. I mean, this makes transporting real. Beam me up has now been, it's now real. Very cool. So as I promised you, I have an amazing guest with us today. I met Michelle in 2006 as we sat next to each other drumming. And she may or may not share a little bit about that, but here's what I know. There are those times in our life when we meet someone who is so powerful, so kind, so generous, and so real, even if they're still in frocks. Because I was, and I know she was, and she'll share a little bit about that with you, that we just know, we have that connection, instant connection. Fellow Canadian sister who lives in Houston, and she is, you know, all of a sudden we just have this, honestly, it was like electricity. Now, it didn't hurt that we were drumming and there were some beautiful men showing us how to drum, but really what it was the connection of the soul and the connection of, hey, I know there's something about you and there's something different. So I'm going to bring on our fabulous guest, Michelle Peavy, and ask her to share some of her story about, you know, why she got into business and what makes this what it is. You know, what does it mean to be where you are today from where you came from? So, you know, round of applause for Michelle Peavy. I'm going to hand it off to you and get you to start sharing a little bit about who you are, and then I'll ask you some more questions as we go along the way. So thank you for being here, Michelle.
Oh, thank you, Jo, and thank you, Sue, for your help. It's just an honor. I was actually pretty excited about what was ready to take place today. I've never done this before, so again, I'm learning something new. And, you know, just a little bit of some, you know, story behind how we met. I do remember that day, and yeah, we were drumming, and I remember the speaker in the stage asked who was from Canada, and right away you put your hands up, I put mine out, and we looked at each other and said, "You're from Canada?" And I said, "Where are you from?" To Calgary. Said, "Me too, but I live in Houston." And it was like some instant connection. And it, you know, Jo, it's always been like that with you and I. It's every time I visit Calgary or I come to an event, we see each other almost like we pick up right where, it's one of those things where we pick up right where we left off at. And, you know, I knew that there was a soulful connection and there was something there with you and I. And, you know, we always seem to cross each other's paths. So I'm just honored, you know, that you've asked me to be a part of this you know, TV show interview. I mean, whatever this is, I'm just excited to, you know, share whatever we need to share today and let whatever happens.
Awesome. And so, Helen, tell us a bit, because you are really, really known in your field for what you do, you know, in terms of your expertise. So tell us a little bit about that. Then I'm going to go forward on some of the things that you're doing now and how you've expanded that expertise.
Okay. So, you know, I'm taking a step back and have taken a step back when as I remove my frocks in my life. You know, we associate ourselves by two things. And being that, number one, what I do, I am an executive recruiter. I'm the owner of my own recruiting business, and I specialize in headhunting, mainly in the oil and gas industry between Calgary and Houston. So my niche and my specialty and the secret sauce is I'm a recruiter that assists corporations with hiring cross-border recruiting challenges, mainly engineers, high-level executive management positions. But I'm going to kind of get off of that, the what I do, and get more into the who I am. And, you know, the reason I say that is what I've learned about myself is that as a recruiter interviewing people, we get so associated when I interview people and with corporations and individuals about what we do. So we're all about the title, the responsibilities, the pedigree, the degree, and people make decisions based on what we do. But there are ingredients that make up who we are. And I started to learn that the who I am is the joy, the pain, the tragedy, the happiness, the love. Everything is mixed up all in a pot that has made me, you, and everybody listening to this today of who you are. So how I describe the who I am, I get to choose that and I get to own it. And I tell people I am a jazzy, classy, sassy, universal woman who helps people point them to their light in order to guide them to help them answer their questions. So I'm a master connector. I'm the person that is a traffic cop almost that stands in the middle of the intersection. And I get to point and I got to say, Joe, you go over there. Sue, no, that door right there. No, 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 no. Make a turn. Whoop, stop, pause. I'm very, very good at pointing and telling people where to go and how to connect. So I'm in a place in my life where I love to teach people how to fish versus making the meal and cooking the meal for them and letting them eat it, because that's a do over, rinse and repeat. So if I can show you some things, you know, I've helped you, I've won. And the other person has won too because they have knowledge.
I totally agree. And I love when you talk about, you know, the title is not who we are in any way, shape, or form. It's not who we are, but really who we are is the culmination, as you mentioned. And I find it interesting because, you know, during your journey and mine, we were kind of on a parallel path in terms of when things had to change, you know, and so I think that is what also linked us. And like attracts like, clearly. So when people are going through transition, they're going to be attracted to other people who are going to, it's like anything else, right? You know, when you buy a car, for example, remember when I have a Ford Escape now, but I remember when I bought my PT Cruiser. And I saw some on the road prior to buying my PT Cruiser. But then they were everywhere. They were in every color. They came in convertible. It's like, where did they come from? And it's the exact same thing with people, you know. And I love what you were talking about with the traffic cop, because I have actually seen you in process. And I'm telling you, you are a talent to behold, not to mention what you do. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I love that, you know, your analogy to the traffic cop, and right behind your head, The Freeway of Life, the book that you wrote. I think, you know, clearly that is brilliant. That shows your brilliance. And you're right, it's not about the title, but all the things that we do, you know, everything we've done takes us to where we are today. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And, you know, if what I've learned is that you have to keep moving. Small movement, large movement. And sometimes when you're moving, you have to really be aware and recognize that you have to take a stop and sometimes pause and rest, because we need to recharge and we need to allow ourselves more energy so that we can keep it moving again. But yeah, I am in full agreement. But I believe as we keep moving, the universe seems to bring us people into our life that kind of grabs our hand. It's almost like grabbing a child's hand and crossing the street from one side to the other side. You've got to hold their hand to get them across. Once they get across, we kind of let go, but we kind of keep them a little bit to our side and we watch them. So that's kind of what's happened for me. And I've seen you in process as well too. And, you know, your journey, Joe, and there were a lot of people that came in, and sometimes people will come more than once. They are reminders, and you know, it's like, okay, I showed them once, let me show you again. And you've been kind of one of those people, Joe, that keep popping up, and you're here again, and you're here again, and you're here again, and we seem to keep connecting. So I know that there's a reason for it. But each person that kind of came into my life, whether it be anywhere in the 5 circles of the influence in our lives, they taught me something. We're the sharper, smarter, more successful people who had a message, who had a connection, a referral, an idea. They pointed me, and you know, I was having a quick conversation with my father this morning, and I said to him, you know, what I've learned about myself is that in order for me to keep my frock on before I took them off, I chose to attract people who lived under the radar, which means they were people who needed me and looked up to me, and I had something to give them. So I was always kind of at the top. Now I choose people who are above my line and above my radar, where I can look up to and they can stretch me and I can learn something from them. I like to get a little uncomfortable now and be challenged to get there. Just like how I mentioned, you know, I have stepped into this world called salsa dancing a year and a half ago. Boy, that is a humbling life experience that I went through to build my confidence. So it's exciting, and I just really, really enjoy what's ahead for me.
I love that. And I love that you segue, you know, talking about doing that, because at one point then, you know, to recognize where you are now means you had to take off those frocks. And so, you know, I think, you know, where I'm going with this is, when did you really know that you had to stop donning the frocks that were holding you back? What was the catalyst to that change for you?
You know, I specifically know the moment and the day and the time. You know, I made some really unhealthy choices and decisions in my life. And I based a lot of my decisions on reaction based from my emotions, and didn't step back and take time to think about things. However, now that I look at it, boy, I am so glad that it did happen. I actually went through, probably about 2 years ago, I had surgery, and I was going through surgery, which ended up in another surgery and then another surgery, where I ended up in the hospital. And it got to a point where I am so used to movement and activity and keep going, I can't sit still. And when I woke up in the hospital, it was dark in the room and I didn't know where I was. And I remember waking up, my cell phone was dead, the battery had died. I had a drip on and I was catheterized. And I distinctly remember looking straight ahead at the edge of my bed, and there was a spirit standing there. And the spirit looked at me. I still get emotional thinking about it because I feel it right here. And the spirit said to me, "Do I have your attention?" And I said, "Yes, you now have my attention." And I remember promising and saying, "Use me for whatever it is I need to be moving forward. And I will promise you that I will be obedient to that." I looked to my left, and there were 3 of my friends sitting there. And I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to talk to them. I wanted to go back to this conversation I was having with this spirit at the end of my bed, and it was gone. So the message was very clear. It took some time to really get really clear with that, but I had to be shaken up, and I had to be flat on my bed. And you know this, Joe, in my hospital room, in order to really hear what it was that was being said to me. And my journey started. So I remember that that's where it happened.
That's so powerful. And what I found, even as we've been doing these different interviews for the television show, what I found is the consistency of us having to come almost to our knees, you know, whatever the person's belief is, because I recognize, whether it's, you know, you believe in higher spirit or whatever, the universe, whatever it may be. For me, I'm very clear in my belief system, as are you as well. And the bottom line is, we have to hit rock bottom typically before we can go up. there are frocks that are not so impeding, if we'll use that term, but a lot of them hold us back from being who we're really supposed to be. And I look at what you've accomplished, knowing, I mean, a fraction of it, because we're not connected every day. I like you feel like we are connected every day, but I know I miss stuff. And the reality is the change that's happened, if you think 2 years back to where you are today, you know, this is amazing to see what you've done. Give us a quick little highlight of the things that you've been able to do since you said enough to the frocks. I'm done with them.
Oh, wow. Well,
you know, 2 minutes or less.
you know, my 5 Circles of Influence program has been really, really powerful for me. I didn't know I was playing around with it.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I was in my healing process. I remember laying in bed, you know, and watching the Olympics and seeing the 5 circle ring of the Olympic rings.
Mm-hmm.
Start of creating my 5 Circles program. Didn't know what I was doing, started some teleseminars and webinars, and then it worked into workshops, which led into me attracting different people into my life, such as business coaches, you know, and during my healing process, I actually stepped into salsa. So I got more into the playing in different circles. I was so caught up to that point, my ego of work and how much money I made. And if I made money, people would like me, or they'd see me powerful and they'd put me on this pedestal, to knowing that I put that a little bit on the side and I started to develop who I was and started to find some of those ingredients. Of course, my recruiting business has always been my main vehicle. I always say to people, you know, you need to be very realistic. You have to have a financial vehicle in order to, you know, to pay out what your dream is. And I believe that I'm always blessed every day in order to, it's what I do with the financial in order to make things happen for myself. And, you know, the most important thing, I got to find my authentic self.
Yeah.
I was really afraid to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was making choices and selecting people in my love life, my personal life, my business life, that were toxic, that I held on to because I wasn't allowed to trust myself. And I let go of all that. And I promised myself, and I learned to fall in love with myself and did a lot of work on myself. And you know what? I came to a place and surrendered and said, I'm okay where I'm at. And anything else that comes into my life is an added benefit. So I was all the ice cream. Everything else that comes in is the whipped cream and the cherry. And sometimes it's a different flavor of sauce. I chose to just let it turn out the way it needed. I let go of the outcome and the expectations of it. And so many beautiful things have integrated into my life since then.
And but you know, I've always adored you and always loved you. But also the change that I've seen in you is the ease and the grace and that calm. Because I think when we met, I too probably had that same, you know, energy in terms of, you know, you're a top performer. So top performer, it's not going to really matter what you do, Michelle, because you're a top performer. If you're going to salsa, you're going to work your hiney off. I know you. I know that's your nature. That's not a bad thing. But when it encompasses everything in our life, I'm not talking about salsa because that's not. But what I'm talking about is exactly what you're saying. You know, I have to be. And it was validation. I wanted people to like me. When I was awarded internationally, I was like, oh, even though I didn't want to be seen because I was afraid, I wanted to be seen to say I did a good enough job, which is, so I was like an oxymoron in my own life. I didn't want validation because I was afraid, but I wanted validation to say I was a good girl. I did a good thing. I was worthy. I measured up, you know. And the truth of the matter is, and I love when you make the analogy about food, because I love food anyway. You know, of course we're sisters. The ice cream for me is pie or cake or any kind of baked good. Until I was okay being the pie in this case, until I was good enough being the apple pie. I was always trying to find ways to make that pie better. That was, you know, they weren't always good choices. Okay. Like I was adding liver to my apple pie. It was wrong. It was the wrong choice. But when we get comfortable in our own skin, that's what changes. And I love also what you said about the 5 rings, because the 5 circles of influence, and for those of you that are watching, check us out on Facebook. We're going to give you more information. There's going to be links and all that kind of stuff. But check this out, because Michelle is the real deal. She walks her talk. I have seen it consistently, and I will tell you, there is no better connector than this woman. This woman doesn't just talk about being someone who connects people. If you need to know, need to go, need to be, you got to talk to Michelle. There's no question about that. This isn't just because we're friends. It isn't just because I want to, share who she is because I adore her. It's because it's true. It's absolutely true. You got to check out 5 Circles of Influence on Facebook, and there's always workshops and things like that I know she's doing. I've been blessed to have Michelle speak at our live events, and I'll tell you, last year we did our very first Frockalicious Life is Calling in Kananaskis, and she was inundated because of what she offers. It's not about the speaker ego situation here, and I'm going to be clear on this, because it's not that. What it is, though, is about the fact that she invited people, engaged them, and didn't you double sell out to you were offering something so cool, didn't you double sell out? You had to get a different venue in a different room, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I really actually played under the radar, where I thought, well, I'll just bring 20 books. I probably won't sell them all, and I'll probably maybe get 10 come in. I ended up with, I think, about 60 people. Had to change the venue within a day's notice. That was a really big moment for me about, wow, there is value in my life and what I can offer people.
Well, and I love you're saying, and I'm going to be careful when I say this in case the internet breaks up a bit, get off your ask. That's with a K, people. Yeah. Although I'd be okay with the ASF anyway. But I love how you've used that and played on it and made it part of, a call to action to say, if you want something. And this, I think, maybe even is the saying that a teacher teaches what she needs to learn. This, for me, would be exactly the same situation. I created live events so I could provide connections, so I could get access to knowledge, so I could, grow my circle by surrounding myself with smarter, sharper people, like you said. I mean, this is why we're so connected, because it's as though I'm talking to my own sister, or, we're at DNA level, okay? And so the interesting thing about that's why I did it, because I needed that. And then I see what you've done, and now you're not, in my opinion, you're not looking for value. You know you have value, and you know what you're doing in the world, and it's multiplying. And look at the lives that you're touching, Michelle. That's what living Frockalicious is to me, is when we let go of the stuff, we no longer seek permission to be the best we can be. To me, seeking permission to live the best life we have or we can live is like going to a dry well and saying, may I have a glass of water? That's asinine, so not to be confused with get off your ass, right? But I love what you've done with that. And I'm so grateful that you're part of, the 12 for 12 program with Frock Off, and that you're in the book as well. I'll just show that to everyone. Just a little reminder, because Michelle's in here as well. And I think more than anything, hon, of the people that I've known, because I've known you in this circle, probably you're one of the few I've known the longest, okay, in this circle, that when I started making my transformation. And likely, as I said, we were attracted to each other because we were both PT cruisers going down the highway at that time. Now I'm an escape. I don't know if that's good given my past, but I think what's amazing is I have actually seen you stand up and step fully into your life with no holds barred. I just watched your video this morning of your salsa competition. Holy wowness, holy wowness. So what got you into salsa?
It was my healing. It was part of my therapy after my surgery for cancer. And 2 months later, I was walking by. Here's what I learned. Sometimes we walk with such a narrow-minded like this, life, rather than open like this.
Yeah.
I had been going to Whole Foods for probably about 10 years, the same store every day, and the dance studio is right next door. And one day I walked in and said, you know what? I've always wanted to learn how to salsa. I don't know. And I walked in, but I always here's the thing. Catch this quickly. We tend to tell ourselves stories, and we make an assumption, a story of what something is when we haven't tried it. So we believe it. And I believed that you needed a dance partner. Well, at that time I was divorced and on my own, and I thought, I don't have a partner to dance with, but I'm going to walk in there and just inquire.
Mm-hmm.
Our first lesson is tonight, and no, you don't need a partner. Everybody comes on their own, and we provide partners. I'm like, oh. So I showed up, and I went, whoa, this is really interesting. And that was the start of my therapy. And I remember 2 specific moments, and salsa has been such a metaphor for my life in every way. I remember them teaching us how to stand properly, where the man holds the woman in the salsa dance. One of the guys, we were rotating guys with women, and he looked at me and he said, look at me, let me lead you, follow me. And I went, oh my God, I am not here for salsa lessons. I am here for a life lesson. Because in my marriage, when I was married, I did not know how to masculate a man and let him lead and follow. And I went, whoa, because in the form of salsa dancing, the woman has to remain extremely passive, very, very much follow the man. Because if you let a man lead you in the dance of salsa, the more he can make you look beautiful and shine. Wow. And it took me some time to learn how to do that. It's still a reminder, but I allow my dance partner to always remind me, my hands are squeezing too tight, I'm too tense, relax, relax. I need the reminder. And that's why it turned out that way. And one more thing, secondly, real quick, we performed in Las Vegas at the beginning of July, a dream of mine. The dream didn't turn out exactly the way I wanted. I always wanted to sing there because I am a singer as well. I ended up performing there. And I remember practicing so hard. Now, interesting enough, the choreographer and instructor became my dance partner. So I was criticized and picked apart the most, which taught me the most. And I grabbed everybody's hand just before we went on backstage to pray. And I asked God that we catch the moves. We were all in flow, we were all in sync. Long story short, it did not turn out that way. I turned into a major fear, and I blanked out and forgot what the routine was, but my partner led me through it. If you watch the video, you'll never know I had any fear. I walked off stage and I started to cry. Well, it just makes me emotional thinking about it. I looked at him and I told him I'm sorry. And I couldn't understand, how can you pray and ask for something so good and it didn't turn out that way? So the next day I woke up, and I woke up feeling very, very blessed. Because for me, it wasn't about the perfection of it. It was about the progress I made. And to still move through the fear and to still actually do it. So I was more on fire than anything and wanted to go do it again. That's why San Antonio was important to me. I wanted to hit it so bad. And I went back to that studio and I kept practicing. So it humbled me still. It's like, it's about progress, not perfection. And I am a perfectionist and learning to let go more of that and just learning about how far I've come.
I think that's amazing. And I love that story. And, you know, what else amazes me about that is at your cellular level, you did know what to do. But when we're so trying to control everything, you know, I love the saying imperfect action, because all life is imperfect action. Everything that we do in life is imperfect action. You know, aside from the fact that we know how to breathe, which isn't actually controlled by us because we're not thinking about it, right? I mean, if you are, there's a problem. The truth of the matter is, it was already in you. You had already practiced. You had already earned it. You'd already done it. And having a good partner, which is no different than, you know, having a good partner in business, having a good partner in a love relationship, having good friends. If it's at that moment that you need someone else to say, hey, take my hand, let me lead you through this. We don't have to do everything. And those were the frocks I donned as well. And I can only imagine how different that was for you, because we're both very used to having to produce. We're used to having to produce. We're used to having to be on our A game. That doesn't leave a lot of room for others to come in, because if they aren't perfect, even though we're not saying it, because I know you never said anything like this to me, okay? And I don't say to people, you have to be perfect. I don't say that. That being said, when you set a standard for always achieving, it is hard for other people to come in and play in your sandbox, because they don't want to let you down, and they don't want to be uncomfortable, right? So if you had one piece of advice you could leave with our viewers, one that you think will really, you know, help change their lives or help get them thinking or doing something different, what would it be?
Get off your ask. And so what I mean by that is, and I'll use a metaphoric analogy. When you order pizza, people know exactly who to call and exactly what to ask for on their pizza. It is a very personal experience. Now, if you step back and replace just that pizza dough sitting by itself, then be specific about what you want on your job pizza, on your personal life pizza, on your financial pizza, on your spiritual pizza, on your health and wellness pizza. And the more specific you are, the more empowering you can be. What happens, especially for women, they are afraid to ask because they don't want to know the answer. And I say, just ask, because the answer is always going to be yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever that answer is, then you know what the next step is to take action. If it's no, it's not personal. It just means not now, not the right time. You didn't ask the question, you weren't specific enough. And I was in that stage where you were talking about, I didn't leave room for people to come into my life, Joe. I produced this looking good frock. I don't need anybody. And I will say this, I've had some really, really candid discussions with my mom and dad and clearing some of my past around not being present and being so with the busyness to avoid some of the pain, because I didn't know how to ask or reach out. And I've had people even say to me, I didn't know how to help you because you seem like you got it all together, Michelle. I noticed that if I'm more humble and I ask for help, and I'm more present, and I'm more, the people are able to, I welcome and invite them in. So just to get off your ask and be specific about what you want on your pizza. You can't call Pizza Hut and say, I want a pizza, and they deliver it, and you go, this is not what I ordered. And they said, yes, you did. You ordered a pizza.
Yeah.
Well, you want mushrooms, you want cheese, you want to, as a recruiter, I have to specifically do that. I have to ask a lot of questions from the person looking for the job and the company that's looking to hire. And the more answers I get, the better the match is, and I'm universally can help people.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, back with the food, I love the food. You know, it's actually a very good analogy, because oftentimes people are too vague. And, you know, you alluded a little bit, I just want to tap into this. You alluded a little bit to being a singer as well. I will tell you, I've been blessed to have you sing on the stage when we've done our live events. And I've seen you at other live events at large crowds singing, and your gifts are, you know, they almost seem endless to me in terms of anything that you could do that was entertaining. What I only recently found out is that you've always wanted to be somebody who's doing, like, caring, whether it's a nurse, a teacher, a singer. And it's amazing how you've actually done all of it. You've actually incorporated everything into your life, even, and I don't want to say by accident, because I don't think it's by accident. It's by virtue of accepting where you're at, and also going, well, you know, this is expansion. Wherever we come from, that's where we are. And those talents follow us, and those needs and desires follow us. So, you know, I'm so grateful for you, hon. You've been in my life an inspiration. You've also been a true friend in the dark moments and in the happy moments. Because the dark moments, the day we sat across from each other and I told you my story before the book came out, I had a real fear that you would bolt. Not because you said you'd bolt, not because you'd even led me to believe that. That was the whole point about telling ourselves a story. That was my story, that people would judge me. And you didn't do that. You reached across the table, you grabbed my hand, you cried, and you said, you know, Joe, thank you for sharing. And I kept thinking, oh, you know, she's going to bolt, but you never bolted. You stood beside me, and you have been one of my biggest cheerleaders. And for that, my dear, I adore you. I will never forget. I'm forever grateful. And for those of you watching, make sure we're going to have all the links, all the connections, like all the ways you can connect with Michelle below the video. And I want you to reach out, because this is a woman who does exactly what she says. And I will also ask that you find ways to give back with Michelle, because she, I'm telling you, she is so talented. There are a multitude of ways to work with her. So Michelle, thank you again. Thank you for being in the book. Thank you for being in my life. Thank you for, you know, thanks for being, and thanks Mom and Dad, who I know will hear this, for producing the most amazing gift to the world in this best form of Michelle, because she's a rock star and a salsa dancer and a singer and a facilitator and a coach. So thanks again, honey. Have a great, great day. Sue, I thank you for being with us and making sure this happens all behind the scenes so seamlessly as we get to chatter and talk about the cool things in life. And for all of you out there, remember to have a frockalicious days. We're going to sign out now. Everybody wave goodbye, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Love you. Bye.
Bye-bye.